Hey guys, welcome to the Neglected Podcast. This podcast is not to change your mind, but to invite you into somebody else's narrative. This is a podcast to give a voice to the neglected. It is also an opportunity for all of us to engage.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Neglected Podcast. My name is Nick Schultz. You can hit me up at Schultzy Time. We are at For the Neglected here at City Church. Thanks for hosting. And like always, producer Quinn, what's going on, man? Thanks for being here. And we got a special guest today. His name is Glenn Paddock. What's up, man?
How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing all right. It's good to see you in person and have this interview. Appreciate you coming on the podcast and share some things I think will be helpful to people about your life. And just a quick glimpse into our relationship, how this happened. We've known each other almost since I moved down to Savannah about 6 years ago. And I think at the time you were still doing what you're doing now, the Dream Campaign. You'll be talking about that. And I was working for one of the churches down here, and that's kind of how we got connected at first. But we never had any personal, you and I go out and spend time together. And I wasn't because I didn't like you or anything like that. It's just like I was doing stuff over here, you're doing stuff over there, and always knew what you and your wife were doing and thought it was awesome. But we'd cross paths here and there from church events and stuff in the community. But it wasn't until about recently, the past couple years, especially this year, where we've seen a lot of you.
Right.
And we are doing things together with the nonprofit I work for, Excel, and nonprofit you work for, Dream Campaign, because we do mentoring with young men.
Right.
And now we're doing activities together where we're mentoring and building wood projects and other things together at locations. And it's been awesome, man. And so I appreciate you and just a little bit of the story that I know about what you've told me. And I'm excited that you get to share it now. And I think it really lends into why you do what you're doing now and why I do it, and just what a big impact you're making in the community and the lives of young men. So thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to come on. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And I really enjoy our friendship that's being built through just the collaboration that we're doing.
Yeah,
so,
man.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's good to collaborate. You're right, and do things together, especially during this time when people are like, man, we don't know what to do, and we're bringing resources together, people together, and fighting the same battles. So it's good stuff. So let's get into it and go with your childhood and life as little Glenn, and where you came from, and where you lived, and your family dynamic, and paint us that picture of what life was like for you, bud.
Sure. I grew up in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. My parents got divorced when I was pretty young. I think first grade, maybe. Always watched my dad work really hard. He worked 2 jobs. He was a school teacher. He taught music. And then he worked at a local horse track as a teller, taking bets at night.
Interesting.
And then my mom was a real estate agent, and she did that for lots of years. But always watched them struggle with money. So didn't grow up in the church, didn't really go to church. I was a pretty good kid, though. Never really got in any trouble. I got in trouble one time in middle school, and it was junior high school. And it happened to be where my dad taught. And that time, I wasn't actually doing anything wrong. I was in math class, and Mr. Osborne was right at the end of the class, and he goes, and the class was just unruly. And he goes, Glenn, go stand out in the hall.
Called you out.
Called me out. So I went out, stood out in the hall. And next thing you know, my dad's walking around the corner. And he just looks at me. I'm like, oh, no. And then I go back in the class, for the very end of it. And that night, let's just say, we had a conversation.
Mm-hmm. Just a conversation.
Just a conversation. Yeah. Like you used to do in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Anyway. And then, graduated school, went off to college. I was going to be a music teacher. And I guess somewhere around my junior year of college, I dropped out. Didn't really want to do that anymore. Started working in bars and bouncing and managing clubs. And then next thing you know, I'm managing a strip club.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
well, let's go back to a couple questions there, because that's covered a lot of ground right there for sure, man. But with your parents' divorce, what did that do to you? Was there a fallout emotionally, or like having to choose one over the other at the time, or how did that transpire for you at that age?
So for me, it wasn't very hard, I guess. I have a little brother. It was probably a little harder for him. We stayed with our mom at the beginning of it, and we'd see, my dad on the weekends. She moved into a house that was like 2 miles down the road from where we were before they got divorced, and then married somebody right away.
Gotcha.
And then, as things progressed a little bit, I wanted to stay with my dad. So both my brother and I ended up moving in with him. And then we would go back and forth between the two.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really remember any fallout from it. They did it really well as divorced parents.
So you weren't mad or anything, or
No, I was young enough where it was just
just went on.
what happened. So
Yeah. And so why do you think you decided to ultimately drop out of college? Was it just the path that you thought you were taking career-wise, or just school sucks and just wasn't into it, or?
Probably all of that. And I think it was probably going to school to be a teacher, you're going to make, $30,000 or so. And I watched my dad struggle. So I wanted to make more.
So you wanted to make more, and then ultimately you fast forward us to working at clubs or managing clubs, bouncing. And
so I started out as bouncing, and then I've always been a leader of some sort. And they saw me as a leader and moved me into a management job, asked me. So I took the job as managing, and I managed and owned strip clubs for about 18 years.
Did you go just from regular clubs to strip clubs, or what was that? How did you transition, or just start doing that?
So it was kind of a both and. I was at a place called the Sports Garden, I think it was, and then got asked to bounce one night at a strip club, and went right into it. And within a month, I was managing Pandora's Box, is what it was called.
Wow. Is this in Virginia too?
This is in West Virginia.
West Virginia, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is in West Virginia. I mean, are you wearing like 80s kind of attire with gold necklaces and like the Miami Vice look, or what's going on here?
No. So I graduated high school in 89.
Okay.
So this would have been,
90s looks.
91,
Okay.
92, somewhere around there.
Gotcha.
And I'm probably dressed the same now as I did back then.
So you were looking good. All right, man. So, that's where you stopped us, was you're managing strip clubs basically. And so
Yeah.
I'm guessing you're seeing things that are probably not that great, either the way women are treated or how things are done in and out of that, and the lifestyle that either you're living or these girls are living. Like what are you seeing that maybe you were expecting and you didn't expect?
Well, and then I should probably back up a little bit. I'd been married before that.
Okay.
And I was a horrible husband and an even worse dad. When I got married, for the first couple of years, I was pretty good. That last year, I cheated on my wife. I lied to her all the time. And she ended up getting pregnant that last year. And right after my son was born, we got divorced. And I was horrible dad through that.
And you were managing the club.
So I started managing the club after that.
After that, okay.
And the whole thing, it was just, I was horrible. There aren't words that I can use on here to explain who I was and what I was then.
Well, maybe you can't explain kind of how you were, but do you have an understanding, at least now, like maybe why you were like that? Was there something that you were just going down the wrong path, or like you weren't ready for it, or?
I wish I knew what the answer was to that, other than I didn't have God in my life. I wasn't surrounding myself with people who were doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was surrounding myself with the fun people. I thought were fun people, just doing all the wrong stuff for all the wrong reasons. So yeah, so ended up getting divorced, and about a year later, my wife got married again. Our ex-wife got married again, and she asked if the guy she was marrying could adopt my son, and I made the absolute best and absolute worst decision of my life when I agreed to it.
Wow, how so?
Well, I didn't want my son to see me doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
So, and then the worst part of it was I wasn't able to be around my son.
Right.
And we'll get back to that
Okay.
in a little while. So we get back to working in the strip clubs. It's amazing what your normal can be.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm in there working in the strip club, and let's say there were people who come in and want to sell drugs. They give me a kickback for selling drugs. And then after a while, they're like, well, why don't you just sell drugs? You can make more money. All right. So that aspect of it kicked off, along with managing the club. I was selling cocaine. And then, like say, girls wanted to make more money. Guys wanted more than what they could have there at the club. So then I ended up having girls working for me as escorts. So it's just building up the bad business stuff. And I was in that for the better part of 17, 18 years. Wow. Doing that without getting caught until when. So, the sex was a commodity almost. Drugs were a commodity. I wasn't really addicted to drugs. I did them. I did cocaine. I did a lot. Alcohol, I drank a lot. And it wasn't until I stopped until I really figured out what the whole problem was and why I was doing it. I can remember when I started managing the clubs, I told my dad and his wife what I was doing. And then I backed it up with, I don't force anybody to do anything. They come to me and ask. If you could have seen the look on his face, it didn't go over well. So yeah.
That's a long time, 17, 18 years.
Yeah.
Man, got a lot of questions, but over that time, what did that period of time do to you as a person? Did you eventually, you said some really hard things were happening and selling girls. Do you look back on it now and be like, man, I was just totally numb to my normal and what was happening? Did I just enjoy it? Was it the money that kept me doing it, or the power, or I just didn't know anything else to do?
Yeah, it was the power. People get addicted to drugs, get addicted to alcohol, get addicted to porn or sex or whatever it may be. Mine was the power. I can make people do some of the most horrendous things you can even imagine for a gram of cocaine. It was the power that did it. And I now know what one of the turning points was. I was living in Charleston, and I hadn't talked to my parents for a while. And then I got a knock on my door. It was a police officer, and he said, "Are you Glenn Paddock?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "You need to contact your dad immediately." Okay. So I called my dad, and he ended up having cancer. He had stage 4. It was some sort of stomach cancer. So I called him, and he told me, and I went home within 2 days. Just left everything that I had there in Charleston and went. And then I basically helped care for him up until he passed away. And my brother and I were both there, when he passed. And we had repaired a lot of our relationship just through sitting and watching, what was the Andy Griffith, the lawyer show, watching that, some other stuff, just watching TV and talking. And we had repaired our relationship fairly well. And then when he passed away, they waited a few months before they read the will. And I'm pretty sure it was because they were afraid of what the reaction was going to be. So I'm sitting in it was at the bank president's office, small town, West Virginia. So we're sitting up in Denny's office and he's reading through the will and everything's going along, and get to my little brother and they say what he's getting. And he goes, "I realize I have another son, Glenn, but I do not recognize him or any more of his offspring." And you could see when he said it, everybody in the room was waiting for my reaction. And knowing me, it was going to be volatile. I just sat there. And he only said a couple more things and it was over. Got up and I thanked Denny and I walked out. And that night I destroyed a whole bunch of stuff. And it just went on a path of destruction for years. To the point where somebody would look at me wrong and I was knocking out your teeth.
Really?
You look at me wrong or say something wrong, I was snatching you up by your neck and taking you out the club or whatever. I wouldn't even let my bouncers do their jobs. I would do it. Trying to numb the pain with, I don't know if you know anything about cocaine or not. People usually do little bumps. What I was doing were gangsters, stuff that would kill you. I should have been dead many times.
So at any point during all of this, were you ever arrested, questioned by police for anything, or overdosed, got in the hospital? So there was no actual...
No consequences
no
for my
consequences
actions.
that would have
other
set off red lights.
Other than not being able to see my son, which was another thing that was fueling the anger and just all the bad decisions.
Did you have anybody during any of that period that was like trying to help you or speak some sort of truth into your life, say, hey, this might not be the best way to live? Would you even entertain it, or did people not even come near you?
People never came to me with that. So much so that there towards the end, my friends bought me a doormat that said, "Welcome to hell." And that was my house. And I displayed it proudly. That was it. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll in the house. And it was rampant. And what I can look at now is that it was, never really knew what love was, because people were just around you because of what you would give them. Never really knew what joy was, because you can never really enjoy what you had because everybody really wanted it. Never knew peace for the same reason, because everybody wanted what you had.
Man. Well, at some point there had to be either a low point that turned it around, or a voice that came in, or how did you get out of that lifestyle?
Well, you would think it would have been the night I got arrested. I got arrested leaving. I was general manager of the Gold Club. I got arrested. It was about 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. We'd shut the club down. I was going home. Got pulled over and they found some cocaine in my truck, and got charged with felony possession is what it ended up being, after I'd paid my lawyer a ton of money and made a deal with the state that I pled guilty, and they dropped it down to felony possession, First Offenders Act, which meant if I did my probation instead of the 14 years in prison that I was signed up for, that I was responsible for, that it would come off my record. So I made that, and you would think I would have gone to see my probation officer, but I didn't go see him at all. I wanted to keep living the same lifestyle I was living, but I couldn't because I'd been arrested. So I was hot, right? Couldn't sell drugs to anybody. Didn't have any girls working for me because, again, I was hot. So I was going around collecting money from people that owed me money. And got to one guy that owed me money, and he wouldn't open his door. So I kicked in his door, and I knew he was there. Kicked in his door and comes running out, and I'm beating him. And there's no doubt in my mind that I was beating him to kill him. I'm jackhammering his head into the floor. Just about that last shot, something grabs a hold of me and tosses me across the room. And nobody in the house with me and this guy. I'm looking around, ready to go to work on whoever it is, right? There's nobody there. So I go to get back on him. I can get right to him, but I can't touch him. I back up, and I'm really ready to go this time, right? I can get to him, but I couldn't touch him.
And there's not
a person in the. So after a third time of trying, I walk out of his house in a daze, like, what's going on? And I start walking. And I walk for a few blocks, and I stop at a building that I've driven by probably 1,000 times since I lived in Savannah, and go inside. It was about 5 minutes to 7. And I go in and sit down. So the building was the old Savannah City Mission. And at 7 o'clock every night, they have a service. You have to go to the service before you can eat. So I go in and sit down. This is on November 6, 2008. At 7 o'clock, Pastor Robinson started preaching, and I couldn't tell you a word he said for those 45 minutes through all the tears and snot. Every tear was a layer of crud coming off, and just the amazing feeling of love and joy and even peace through all of it. In that 45 minutes of crying, just letting it all out. At the end of that, Pastor Robinson was standing in front of me and said, would anybody like to give their life to Christ? So that was, like I said, November 6, 2008. I leave there that night, and I come back there in the morning. I knew that's where I needed to be, and they had a residential program for guys that were sick and tired of being sick and tired and maturing their misery. So I go back there, and most of the guys, and I'm still friends with most of those guys. They're drug addicts and homeless and the whole 9 yards that was there. So I go in, I go to talk to the chaplain, and I had to wait for him, actually. And when he got there, I went in the office, and I said, I'd like to be a part of this program. And he's looking at me because I look kind of like I look right now. Don't look like I'm homeless. I don't look like I'm strung out on drugs. I don't look like I'm supposed to be there. And he goes, this might not be the place for you. So after what felt like 2 hours of talking with him, I finally said, I don't know how to love God, and I don't know how to let God love me. And he said, all right, go on over in the warehouse and work. I think I worked harder in those 2 days in the warehouse than I've probably ever worked in my life. He came over and he says, okay, you are a probationary member in this program, the Urban Training Institute. Fast forward a couple months, I'm on TV. It was cold. The TV station had come in, and I was the one that, just happened to be the one to tell them what was going on. And we had let guys sleep on the floor that night, or the night before. And so the next morning, I'm working the front desk, and the guy walks in. He's a probation officer, and we have probation officers come in all the time to talk to homeless guys. Mm-hmm. So he goes, is your name Glenn Paddock? I just thought he saw me off TV the night before. He goes, I have a warrant for your arrest, but I can't take you because I'm in my own vehicle. I am your probation officer who you've never met. And he goes, it would look better for you if you went and turned yourself in. I said, yes, sir. The old me would have been gone, right?
Yeah.
2 states over. I went in the back, got somebody to drive me to the jail and turn myself in.
Was this from like a lot of past things that you didn't follow up with, or when you were beating up the guy? Or?
No, it was just from the cocaine arrest.
Okay.
I never went to see my probation officer.
Right.
So I went in, and that was almost a year to the date that I had pled guilty to it, but I never went to see him. So I went in, I sat in jail for 2 months before I got to go to court. My probation officer came in and saw me while I was in jail, and he goes, "You're the first one that's ever turned himself in. I see something good in you." And then I go in front of the judge, and the executive director of the mission is there, Jim Lewis. He stands up for me. And my probation officer stands up for me in court. The judge goes, "You know I could give you your 14 years. I said, "Yes, sir." He goes, "But these two men see something good in you, and so do I. I'm going to sentence you to finish out your time at the old Savannah City mission, which was another 10 months in my program, and you get to keep your First Offenders Act."
Holy cow.
But God, right?
What are you feeling in that moment? I mean, were you thinking you're going in for
I was prepared
years?
for whatever he was going to do.
Really? You had peace about going in?
I was okay with whatever.
Really?
It's one of those, when I got saved, there was such a relief from all of my stuff. And when I say pile stuff on and pile stuff on and pile stuff on, and some of the most horrific things you can even imagine, I did worse than that. And that night that I got saved, it was kind of like through all the snot and tears, I got to slide that over there. Not that I don't ask for forgiveness daily, because I still do things that I remember. I still contact and ask forgiveness. But at that moment in time, I was prepared for whatever I had to do. It wouldn't have mattered. So through tears, I thanked the judge, and I thanked my probation officer, and I went back to the mission. And within days, I got a call from it was actually a Facebook message from my little brother saying my mom wasn't doing well. She was in the hospital. And then the next day I got a call saying that she had passed away. And I was on probation, and things didn't work so that I could go up for the funeral. And to this day, that still haunts me, not being able to be up there for the funeral. A little twinge of anger started to come up, and the chaplain came to me, asked me how I was doing. I said, I'm a little angry. He says, rightly so. I said, well, what do I do about it? Because I don't want to be the same guy who I used to be. And he goes, read Philippians 4. Okay. So I read it. And he asked me the next day, how you feeling? I said, I'm still angry. And he said, did you read Philippians 4? I said, yes. He said, read it again. So I read it again, and it's the same thing. He says, now read it until you're not. So I read it probably 100 times or more until it sank in. And and to this day, my little brother and I really don't have much of a relationship other than Christmas and birthdays and, how you doing? Great. I'm doing well. But no real dialogue.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that has to do with not being there and helping him through that mess, not being able to be there for that. And it breaks my heart every day that I wasn't able to do that.
And what was it like for just other people that knew you? I mean, whether it was up north or down here, that like, who is this guy? And what was it like for you when you did change? And like you said before, asking for forgiveness. Now there's 2 decades or more. I don't know how many worth of time, and how many people are in there that you've hurt in some way through your lifestyle. And how do you start to begin to deal with that or get forgiveness either from them or yourself, or what was that process like with the New Glenn?
So when I graduated that program, I went through and I graduated, and then I started my senior year of college the next day. And I ended up graduating from City Vision College with a bachelor's in urban ministry. And then started working. I worked for the Old Savannah City Mission for a year, just trying to pay back for all the help that they'd, given me and really given me my life back.
And how old are you at this point? What stage of life are you in?
So I got saved when I was 38, so it was 40.
Okay. So you're starting over at
at
like
40.
40, yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry. What was your question again?
I was just going to New Glenn and how you
New Glenn
with people that you've heard and all that.
Yeah. So that in that year that I was working for the Old Savannah City Mission, I don't know if you remember Don Logano or not. He was a TV anchor for I think it was TOC, WTOC. And they wanted to do a feature piece on someone from the Old Savannah City Mission. And Jim Lewis was the executive director, and I was basically following in his shoes. My degree would allow me to go be an executive director of a mission. So, he was mentoring me through that. And he says, I got the perfect guy. So they do a news story on me. It was called From Pimp to Pastor. And it was just, they led up to it for a week and a half, showing little snippets of my testimony, all the way up until the night before, till the night that they did it. So I'd started dating my wife not much longer before that.
So she got to see this.
So she got to see, and she knew my story.
Yeah.
But she had to tell her mom that they were going to talk about me and mention my name, have my picture on TV. And it was like a 10-minute deal on the TV. And then they did it live from the Old Savannah City Mission when they did it. So, but praise God, her mom loved me, and she saw the new Glenn, not the old Glenn.
Yeah.
And then with that, everybody got to see who I was now, just because of the news articles, and it was posted on Facebook everywhere. And I had people who used to work for me call me up, and just the whole 9 yards of is that really you? Have you really changed? And I think there are some people, even it was 2008, 12 years later, still waiting for the other shoe to drop because of who I used to be. Mm-hmm. So yeah, slowly but surely writing some relationships that I had destroyed. And then some you just, all you can do is ask for forgiveness and leave it in their court.
Yeah, and you mentioned still asking God for forgiveness, and is that something that's a struggle even now, where just random memories or dreams or people come to your mind that have been hurt that take you back to there or trigger something in you, or are you able to fully just kind of go on with your life without being drawn back into the emotional side of what your life was like?
Yeah, no, I'm able now to just freely give it over. It's, I went to the first Pivot conference, and
a men's conference.
Yeah. And Bill McGee did an amazing skit, and it was he came out and he was carrying a bunch of suitcases, and then there was a cross in the middle of the thing, and he was talking, and then the next thing you know, he sets down a bag in front of the cross and feeling pretty good, and he puts another bag down. It's feeling a lot lighter, and he sets them all down. And he sets them all down with the last one. He said, man, I can hold on to this one. And then he starts walking around again. I'm okay. I can probably grab this one. And the next thing you know, he's grabbed up all of his bags and then a couple more that were laying around the stage. And that really hit home. I don't ever want to grab up any more bags. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, it makes sense. And, I'm interested too, just the relationship with your wife. what that was like for her to navigate. Here's how I used to be. I'm going to tell you some things.
So when we first started dating, we would go out. There wasn't anywhere that I could go that people didn't know me. I managed clubs in the area for a long time. I had thousands of dancers and even more people come into the clubs that knew me. And then just the sheer fact that everybody knew who I was.
Right.
So we would go out to dinner, and there would be, someone would come up and say, hey, or one of the girls that used to work for me would message me on Facebook or come and see us there. And, Morgan would ask where I knew him from. She used to work for me. So fast forward to us figuring out what we wanted to do. We knew we weren't going to stay in Savannah for that reason alone when we got married. So we got married, and she asked, where don't you want to work? Or she asked me where I wanted to live. And I'm like, I don't really care. It doesn't matter to me. She goes, is there anywhere where you don't want to live? And this is where I learned you never tell God what you don't want to do. I said, I don't want to live in Atlanta. Can't stand Atlanta. Well, 2 weeks later, we got an offer to work, and it was our only offer to work at a mission in Atlanta to implement a program like I had just graduated from and graduated college to be able to do. It was at Rescue Atlanta was the name of it. So we get up there, and we're there for about a year, and it shuts. We're there for about 6 months, and it shuts down. It was a husband and wife that ran it, and they ended up in divorce, and the mission shut down. So we move into a $100 a month house in not Buckhead, but Bankhead, which back at that time was the exact opposite of Buckhead. So we're living there and can't really afford to have the heat on, bags of rice and beans and pasta, just all the stuff. And then Dave Stewart called us, and this was right after there was a shooting at the fair. Why don't y'all come down and do your program in Savannah? So we come down and visit with Dave, and Phil Fincher was, I think he was the outreach pastor at the time. So we come down, we meet with those two, and we, through lots of tears on Morgan's side, we come back to Savannah because she is worried about being thrown back into my old world. So much so that there was and there still is, a nonprofit that goes in to the strip clubs and loves on the girls. It's escaping me right now. The Sunshine Girls. And they had asked Morgan to help with that. And I think that was probably one of the main reasons why we were supposed to come back to Savannah, was for that reason alone. So through lots of prayer, she ended up going to the clubs one night, and it was one of the clubs that I managed. And when I say lots of prayer, I'm talking like hundreds and hundreds of people praying. She went in and she couldn't picture me there. And she thought she was going to go in and she didn't know what to expect with the girls. And what she saw was they were just mothers and daughters and wives, and got to love on them. And it probably fixed a bunch of holes in our relationship just from her being able to do that.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Man. Wow. That's really incredible. And you mentioned at the beginning, I want to make sure we don't miss it. You were talking about your son, I believe.
Yeah, so we haven't even gotten to that point yet. So on Monday nights, I have a Bible study called Man Cave Bible Study. We meet around a group of men, meet around a fire pit, and talk about Jesus, right? So I guess it was probably 4 or 5 years ago. After one man cave, I come inside and I look at my phone, and there's my phone messenger is like, I have a message from Jacob Balico, who is my son. And the message is, "Hey, Dad. I set the phone down and walked around the house for a little bit, and I didn't know what to do with that. So I sent him back a message, and he said, 'Can I call you?' And I gave him my number. And we talked that night, and I apologized, and he asked some really hard questions. But I gave him, truthful answers. And it started off with, maybe talking once a month or whatever, and his mom was fully against it. I mean, didn't want any part of it, him having any part to do with me.
Did she know that you had changed at that point?
Well, probably not. Maybe, I don't know. But he kept I let him lead on that. I didn't want to, and the whole reason why I hadn't contacted him is because I didn't want to hurt her, and I didn't want to do any damage to the relationship with Jake and the family. And truly the only reason for me contacting him before then would have been for me, not for him. It would have been for me, and I left that in God's hands. So over the next 4 years, we start talking more and more, and I've gone to see him. As a matter of fact, Friday afternoon, we're going up there and celebrate his birthday. He's going to be 24. Can't believe I have a 24-year-old. But yeah, we talk just about every day on the phone, and God has done amazing things. So.
Wow.
Which leads me kind of what I do now.
Yeah. Let's talk about that in a second. But, you just mentioned God, and I'm interested now in the place that you're at now. When you look back at your childhood, you look back at your lifestyle, especially in the clubs and the drugs and the girls, and then get into that place where you kind of made that decision to change everything. What do you think your view was on God or faith during all that time before that happened? Did you even acknowledge him or think anything of him, or that he was real?
Didn't think anything of him. But I was probably closer to being the devil for a lot of those years. I was as evil as they came. Not much evil than me existed at that time. So,
wow, it's incredible. And even the part of your story where you're going there and you're hurting this guy. He's okay, right? Did he end up being okay?
He survived.
Okay. Just making sure.
He didn't die.
Okay, just making sure. But you saying that you're going to hurt him and like you physically can't, and that to me it sounds like an out of body experience that you couldn't explain at the time. You can barely explain it now. It's
it had the literal only thing I can think is the Holy Spirit stopping me from me, stopping me from being me.
Yeah. That's just, it's incredible. And, you're at this place now where we're talking about you're working for this nonprofit called the Dream Campaign. And I guess just briefly explain what the Dream Campaign is and who it targets and what you do.
Yeah, so we are a mentoring program that helps kids discover what it is they're passionate about, help them develop as leaders, and then dream big for their future. That's the nutshell of it. And then with that, we have a program inside of it called the Toolbox, where we give, there's a Bible lesson that goes with the tool. They get a toolbox. They get a new tool each month. They learn how to use the tool. They make a project with the tool that they can either take home with them or a community service project. But through those tools, they're getting, we're equipping them with skills that they will have for the rest of their life.
And you're primarily working with young men, right?
Well,
females.
We are literally from first grade to high school, 12th grade in the Dream Campaign.
Okay.
Now the toolbox is mostly teens, boys, and now girls. We have a girls toolbox also. So
man, you're working with young people. A lot of them, I'm sure, have difficult home lives, or maybe don't have the dad in the picture, or they do and just need other men or good people in their lives. And here you are, the worst of the worst back in the day, the devil himself, like you said, and now you are mentoring and advising and teaching these youth about God, and to basically be everything that you weren't in your former prior life. And what do you allow them to know about your past when they're mature enough in order to hear?
So when they're old enough, I tell them everything. I don't want them to go down the same road as I did. They don't have to hit the same walls that I did. I've hit my face against that wall enough times where they don't have to. They can move over and do something else stupid, but they don't have to keep doing the same things that I did. And I know deep down in my heart that I do this because I'm trying to make up for not being there for my son. Not that I can ever make up for that, but still trying to have an impact on these young men and women and giving them skills that they will have for the rest of their lives.
Wow. And I know it's really rewarding, but what is some of the hardest things that you have to encounter now, and now in this current time with youth and what they go through that kind of breaks your heart, for either it's the home situation or the neighborhood situation, or just emotionally? Like what are some of the things that you're having to fight against with them and kind of help them through?
So when we initially moved back to Savannah and moved into the house that we were in, which is another story altogether. The house that we lived in on 34th and Reynolds was actually a guy who used to come in to the clubs all the time. He saw a post one night on Facebook and then started blowing my phone up at 4:00 in the morning. I got a place for you to rent. I got a place for you to rent. And we ended up there. Wow. So we went in, and what we originally wanted to do was work with teen boys, 15 and up. Well, they were already drug runners. They were already doing their thing, and there weren't no 15 and up boys to work with. So we started working with 4th and 5th graders. Jeffrey. I don't know if you've ever met Jeffrey or not, but Jeffrey was on our doorstep when we were going to move in. He goes, "Can I help you?" The next thing you know, we're playing 1,000 games of Candyland, and he's singing Andy Mineo's In Our City, screaming at the top of his lungs, going down the street. So, yeah. So gangs were one of the major things, so much so that I went and got certified as a gang intervention and prevention specialist.
Oh, really? Wow.
Just because I wanted to have as much knowledge as I could and be able to help as much as I could. And our house ended up being called the Safe House by the kids. We called it the Dream Campaign House, or whatever, the Dream House. But everybody in the neighborhood called it the Safe House. And even the gang members would bring their little brothers and sisters over because they knew they'd be safe at our house because we didn't let any mess go on. We had one girl early in the morning come running up to our doorstep. Someone tried to abduct her. We'd never met that girl before, but she knew that our house was safe. So the next thing you know, there's 40 police officers trying to find the guy. So
wow, it's really incredible. And so when you look back in the situations that you were in, we always love to end the podcast with, what is something somebody can do, like a tangible thing that they can do to help someone else out. And we'll go from two different levels. We'll do one with the type of youth you're working with now in the Dream Campaign, what somebody can do for that target audience that you're helping. But just for you personally, what you went through, and you are in that kind of horrible lifestyle, living that life. was there anything, even looking back on it, that somebody could have done to just show you love and intervene, or at any stage in that process where like, this helped? I didn't change right away, but it maybe helped a little bit. What can somebody even do?
So I think, especially for men, I think having a guy that would have reached out and maybe had a talk with me, as scary as it would have been at that time, probably wouldn't have done anything for me, but it would have shown that somebody actually cared that I was doing something wrong, instead of everybody really wanting me to do something wrong.
And then maybe over time you would eventually trust somebody that
so
knew
the
you had
more
the best interest.
the more that guy or guys would have come to talk to me, the more maybe I would have heard them.
Yeah, maybe. Well, I mean, one of your big lines we always talk about is just showing up.
Yeah. So literally that's 99% of it is showing up and be present while you're there.
Yeah.
I do counseling with guys now for multitudes of reasons, but most of them are drugs, alcohol, and porn. And literally is just being there to hear them talk and then interject because I lived that life. So, yeah.
Okay, well, let's take it to the youth that you're working with now in ways that, whether people do it through the Dream Campaign and volunteer that way, but just even for somebody listening that they probably have some kid in elementary school or teen that's at a house with a single mom or has difficult home life, or you just see them all the time and they look unhappy or depressed, or there's kids all around us that are hurting if you have your eyes open and you're in the right places. But from your experience, like, how can somebody get involved in the type of things you're doing, or just in a kid's life in general, that, hey, this means a lot? It is just showing up, but how do you take that step to just show up?
So one of the things that we did, and this isn't for everyone, we poured a basketball goal because we saw kids walking down the street. One kid got hit because he was bouncing up a ball walking down the street. So we poured a basketball goal, and that's not for everyone to do, but it became the place where everybody played ball. It could be going into your area rec center or where they do after school programs and going and read to them, or going and help with math or whatever it is that you might be skilled at, or finding a program in the area wherever you are that does some things that you enjoy to do. Don't ever do something that you aren't passionate about, because it will show.
Yeah, kids sniff that out.
Kids,
really quick.
and kids can be brutal. So, always make sure that it's something that you want to do. So,
yeah, that's good advice, man. And I know we could probably have questions for the next 3 hours and talk about some of the stuff you've went through, but I think you've really painted that picture very well of what life was like and where you were and where you are now, and just really how incredible it is that a guy like you and how you described yourself is now doing what you're doing right now. And it's pretty amazing. For someone who gets to do that kind of work side by side with you, if you didn't tell me those things, I wouldn't have known about them, or I wouldn't have found out because of who you are now. And that's just really incredible that you've dedicated your life to give back, to help youth so that they don't go to that path or even near that path because of how destructive it can be for them and for all sorts of people around them. But it's amazing to see your life and where you're at right now. And I appreciate you sharing that.
I tell you, I get blessed every day to be around the kids that we are. And anybody who volunteers will say this, that you get more out of it than the kids do. Yeah. And that holds true every day. I get blessed by these kids.
Yeah.
So I love doing it.
Yep. Well, it shows, and I know the kids I've seen around you, they really appreciate it too. And yeah, man, doing good stuff. So thank you for being here and sharing and being vulnerable with us and giving people hope too. It's like that's a really dark place to come from, but to see where you're at now and giving other kids hope, appreciate it. Yep. So thank you for being here. Quinn, thanks for producing. City Church, thanks for hosting us. And this has been Neglected. We'll catch you next time. Peace.